setting up. I know it was tempting to not go to bed at all with the Yardbirds on the pool stage and the Jukebox Beatles making a ton of noise up here. So very glad to have you out here. I'm your music host, Joe Johnson. It's our last Q&A on my side. That sounded a little make-believe there. But before we really get going, we're going to talk about the British invasion, and also from our guest point of view, because several of them are from the UK, so they're going to give us their opinion. But before we get too deep into that, I wanted to let you know that all these men you're going to see on the stage have nothing against, when it comes to Dusty Springfield. She was the first woman to come across and become part of the British invasion, and with I Only Want to Be With You in January of 1964. So in recognition of International Women's Month, I wanted to make sure that you knew that. See, that's the applause I was hoping for. No, I'm just kidding, you guys. Well, we're going to bring out our group right here. We actually have a special guest. I'm trying to put him in order here, but I invited some musicians and friends to join me here. We have a Grammy-winning member of Wings for a little more than 10 years. Laurence, Juber. There's a chance he might even play a little bit for us. And did you stay up for the Yardbirds last night? Founding member drummer Jim McCarty. Have a seat, my friend. And these guys were around to experience Beatlemania and the British invasion as fans, but they got an inside peek when the Beatles signed them to be their opening act in the 1966 tour that ended at Candlestick Park that we heard about on the anthology. So they're going to be out here from the Cyrkle, Don Danneman, Michael Lewiskamp, and McLaughlin. Pat McLaughlin, come on up here. And we are blessed by a very special guest that we weren't sure if he was going to be come, because he's been playing a lot. He played a lot yesterday. You've seen his full performances with the other bands, and he's a legend. And he's a multi-Grammy winner. He produced Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor's albums, in addition to being part of Peter and Gordon. Peter Asher, please. Jim, I wanted to start with you because you go back to before the American invasion. Well, LJ does too. But I wanted to know what kind of music were you listening to, and what period of time was it, and whereabouts were you in the UK?
Well, we lived in the south of London, in the suburbs. I lived in a place called Teddington, which was quite near Richmond and Kingston. It sort of became a bit of a hub in the early 60s when the Rolling Stones started to play there. But we used to listen to rock and roll from the US, like Buddy Holly, the Everly Brothers, and Johnny Cash, and all that stuff.
What was it about those songs? Because most every artist who came in on the British invasion cites those half a dozen or dozen artists, from Chuck Berry to Buddy Holly, obviously, to all the artists that you mentioned. What was it about them that made all the guys your age and girls your age love that kind of music?
Well, I think on the radio in England, we didn't have anything like that, you know.
Okay, fair enough.
It was all very sort of straight and ballady and, orchestras, but nothing like early US rock and roll. But then of course, when we heard the blues, which we called R&B. It's not really R&B now, is it? But when we heard early blues, we were completely gone with it, you know, enamored with it, let's say.
And that's where the Yardbirds really around that type of music.
Because we started to hear, you know, Bo Diddley and Jimmy Reed and all those guys, you know, B.B. King and Muddy Waters. And it was very exciting. It was like rock and roll, but it had a raw emotion to it.
Awesome.
Which was great.
LJ, when you were growing up, I know you heard the Beatles, obviously, because living in England, but how did that influence you, and when did you start to recognize that America had some beef?
Well, I had a cousin that played me Buddy Holly and Elvis records, which I guess I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. And then I became aware of the Beatles in October of '62. And then we had that whole year of 1963 where it was just, you know, the progression of Please Please Me, Love Me Do, She Loves You, and then I Want to Hold Your Hand. And I was already like a Cliff Richard fan and a huge Shadows fan, you know, because Hank Marvin was like, because he looked kind of like Buddy Holly and he played the Stratocaster and he played all this really cool twangy guitar stuff. But '63 I started to become aware of the Stones too, but I lived in North London and I was, you know, much younger, so I wasn't yet able to drive and but my very first concert, and I remember the date, was July 29th, 1963 at the Southend-on-Sea Odeon. It was Jerry and the Pacemakers and Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas. And to bring it full circle, I just, with Jeff Perholtz from the Newbies, I just co-produced a new album for Billy J. Kramer.
We were there. I was at the studio too in late August for his 80th birthday. It was really special.
Yeah.
And the jukebox was there too. I think they may have played on some tracks.
But radio was really important because the BBC played, you know, didn't play a lot of American pop music, but later in the evening I could hear like jazz, like Louis Armstrong and Django Reinhardt and stuff like that. But Radio Luxembourg, which was broadcast from the continent, that was when I could hear all the American top 40 stuff.
Was that considered a pirate station?
No, it wasn't pirate. It was a legitimate station, but it was broadcast from Luxembourg, you know,
right.
on the continent. So they had, you know, that was where the American stuff was. And you got a little bit of it on the BBC. But Saturday Club, Brian Matthews' Saturday Club on Saturday morning.
Love that show.
You know, because all the Beatles at the BBC stuff was recorded for that. And that was the first time I ever heard Johnny B. Good, was the Beatles doing it on Saturday Club. So that, you know, I'd skip soccer practice to listen to it.
Well, nobody can tell. Peter,
You've never seen me play soccer.
Thanks for coming and getting up early. It's great to have you.
No, it might conflict with something.
No, it's perfect. We're happy here. Tell us what your first inkling to the British invasion from your side to our side.
Well, what Laurence says is entirely true. The only way we could listen to American music was 208, which was Radio Luxembourg. And that was the source of all kinds of music. And Voice of America had the best jazz program. Willis Conover was the famous DJ who played jazz on Voice of America, which was largely intended for all the American troops in Europe, but we would listen to that, to hear jazz. And my first concert was a genuine American rock and roller. It was Bill Haley.
Did he come to London?
He was the first, he came to play London. He was the first American rock and roller to come, actually. There was a riot at Victoria Station when his train came in. It was extraordinary. And was such an unlikely rock god, you know, with his little kiss curl and his Arden jacket. But yes, I was a Cliff fan. I was a huge Hank Marvin fan, as we all were. That was the first Stratocaster ever in England. And he could only get, because you couldn't take more than 50 pounds out of the country, these real post-war regulations. You couldn't order things from overseas. So Cliff was the only person with enough money and enough contacts that he actually bought a brand new cherry red Stratocaster in America and had it shipped over by the record company. So when we went to see Cliff and the Shads, we were going as much to see the guitar as we went to see the guitars. And we would go, oh no, there it is. Because we were buying weird guitars made in, you know, foreign countries, European countries that we'd never even heard of. And my first acoustic guitar, it was like £3 and I don't know where it was made, Czechoslovakia or something. But no, it was exciting. And yeah, it was all based on American music. And it wasn't, yes, Brian Matthew's show was important, but they also, there was also the other problem the BBC had was there was a restriction on how many records you could play, how much what they called needle time you were allowed to have. It was a union thing. The musicians' union, the MU, had reached an agreement with the BBC that the BBC wouldn't play more than a certain amount of recorded music. So all the DJs would play, they would try to play records, but they'd generally be forced by this rule to have bands on live. So that's why there are so many excellent BBC tapes of so many bands doing their songs on the BBC, because you couldn't play the record. It was sort of against the union rules, and the BBC was very rule conscious. And of course that's why pirate radio jumped into the picture and played as much recorded music as they liked. And then there was also Pick of the Pops with Alan Freeman, which was one of the only hours they were allowed to play the actual top 20. But yeah, it was fascinating. It was completely different. And why did we fall in love with rock and roll so heavily? Because we'd never heard anything like it, is the answer. I mean, we knew nothing. The hits in England were all Val Dunica and stuff. If you're curious, look him up. But Val Dunica and Tippy wore cardigans and sang soft, familiar songs and had big hits. And sort of Irish tenor, you know. And so we were listening to a whole different kind of music, and the minute we heard Elvis, or even Bill Haley, even dear Bill Haley, we were kind of going, what the hell is this? This is the best stuff I've ever had in my life. And that's the point I was making. People forget that the entire British invasion was based around us falling in love with your music. And what was so weird is that we then, you know, fell in love with your music, learned it, tweaked it ever so slightly, and sold it all back to you.
Yeah, the half of the Beatles' first album were cover songs.
So yes, that's what it was like. It was rock and roll was a great shock. It was a shock Britain needed.
And unfortunately, it kind of put Elvis out of the business, you know, because he got to be too Beatle-ish, and the Beatles.
Well, the Colonel was such a complete jerk that it's not surprising. You know, he ended up doing all those terrible films and all that stuff. And you know, it's sad. I saw Elvis when his first sort of revival when he played in Vegas, you know, the Hilton or whatever it was, and it was amazing. It was completely amazing. And even though it was all the stupid karate moves and all that stuff, in there somewhere you could see the Elvis we'd fallen in love with, which is Mystery Train and you know, That's All Right Mama and stuff that we just were completely overwhelmed by. Mystery Train's my favorite Elvis track by far.
Yeah, that's great.
I want to ask the Cyrkle, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but how did you get invited to tour with the Beatles in 1966, the one that ended the whole thing? Because you know, it's an important part of history, but that we hear what you did with them on tour and how that was and how it came about, Tom.
In 1964, the Rondells from Lafayette College, some of you may have heard this story before, but it's the same thing, doesn't change. The Rondells from Lafayette College bought long-haired Beatle wigs. We were blown away by the Beatles. And we did a show, and it was so successful, it started a chain reaction. And I won't give you every detail, but the gist is, it got us to Atlantic City, it got us to the Alibi Bar, where we had got us a couple of summer jobs. It got us to meet Nat Weiss, partner to Brian Epstein, Beatle manager Brian Epstein. Got me to New York, got to meet Brian, got us a Columbia record contract, got us Red Rubber Ball, and Brian invited us on the Beatles tour. And that's basically the connection. And let me just share one thing that was really amazing to me about being able to do that tour. At the time, I was in the Coast Guard Reserve, and it was 6 months active duty, and I was going to miss the tour. I was getting out too late, and they were going to actually replace me. And the United States government, thinking we got to get Don Daneman on this tour. They actually changed the requirements to 5. It was mind-blowingly, awesomely lucky that I got out because they changed it to 5. I made the Beatles tour.
And were you on the same flights with them, or in the same limo, or probably not the limo, but the flights?
Yeah, it was a regular commercial airliner, and the whole tour was on it. All the acts, all the managers, all the press, and the Beatles were always in the back. They built a wall on the plane, and the Beatles were in the back. And once in a while, they would come out.
And I know that you have a story about playing cards with Paul or something like that.
Well, as far as playing cards go, that was just on the tour itself. That was in the middle. But the first time we actually, because we actually had 2 hit records at the time with this, so we had some stature, but we were as big Beatle fans as any of you guys were. And the first plane ride from New York to Chicago, are we going to meet them? Are we going to meet them? They're behind the wall. Oh my God. Anyway, well into the flight, the door opens and there's Paul. And out. Now, I want you to picture yourself, there's Paul, a door opens and there's Paul. Well, whatever you might feel, we felt. Same thing. And he works his way up. We were kind of sitting in the front. And now he's right by us. And Nat Weiss, partner to Brian Epstein, he knows him, of course. He'd met him, so he introduces us. Don Daneman of the Cyrkle, me, Paul McCartney. Get to shake his hand. And a couple of silly comments. Oh, we're looking forward to playing. He says, well, it's great that you're here. Tommy Dawes, my bandmate, sitting next to me. Same thing. And then Paul goes, well, good to see you. Back he goes, disappears behind the wall. Nobody else comes out. And we spent the rest of the flight analyzing every little stupid word. How could we have been cooler? But that particular meeting, you really got that Paul was a good regular guy. I mean, he shook the hands, he smiled, yeah. Really good.
You didn't sit on the floor by the curtain listening for songs? Jim, and the Yardbirds had a pretty heavy lineup originally with Clapton and Jimmy. Tell us about how they just wanted to stay core blues, or what happened?
They just wanted to...
No, it's, play the blues as opposed to...
Well, yeah, I mean, Clapton more than the others. Clapton was a dedicated blues man, and he wasn't really happy with doing For Your Love as our single.
Wow.
For Your Love was,
for sure.
was not really that like a blues song. But we liked it. We thought it was different, and we needed a hit. All the bands, at the time, as you know, you all need a hit record. and all our contemporaries had hits, the Stones, the Kinks, the Who, all these bands, and we hadn't had one, so. But we thought For Your Love was a great song, and actually we were playing with the Beatles when we found the song. We did their Christmas show in Hammersmith in London, and there was a publisher there, and he had an acetate, an old funny little
Test pressing
45 record, and it was like a vinyl sort of thing, and he took it to our manager, Giorgio Gamelski, our mad manager, and we all went up to his house, and we all liked it.
Awesome, fantastic. Peter, I wanted to ask you, Paul McCartney lived in your mom's house and for a while, and he says a disused piano, and they wrote a lot of hits there. Did you have, by then you had already moved from the house, right, and you were living somewhere else? I just wonder what stories you have from inside the house.
No, I was still in the house. Paul's bedroom and mine were next to each other on the top floor of the house.
And was he constantly rehearsing songs as well?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And how did they present you with A World Without Love? How did that became your first hit?
Yes.
I know you tell it in your show.
Yes, I do. Which is the 1 o'clock. Yes, we would, when we got signed, we were looking for songs, and I remember hearing this unfinished song that Paul had played me, Well Without Love, that was, he explained was a reject. John didn't like it. In particular, he thought the first line of the lyrics, "Please lock me away," was ridiculous. So when Paul would try to sell him on the song, John would apparently interrupt him and say, "Okay, I will lock you away, the song's over." So they were never going to do it, it wasn't finished. So when we got signed, I went back to Paul the following night and asked him if the song was still up for grabs. And he said, "Yes, you can have it." We went, "Oh, thanks." Not realizing that was a significant moment in my life. And before, in time for the session, I did persuade him to ride the bridge, which he did in a matter of minutes, infuriatingly short, 5 minutes or so. Which, no, I'm not kidding, because if you're Paul McCartney, that's how long it takes. He'd written the verses, so we just had to do the, "So I wait, and in a while I will see my true love song," that bit of the song. So he knocked it out and gave it to us and wrote it down and left. That was it. And then eventually we both moved out, but yeah, it was my family home, my parents and my 2 sisters, and Paul stayed there for 2 years.
You would think anything written in the house belongs to the house.
Yeah, I hadn't learned about publishing by then. You should have figured something out, you're quite right.
So the hit for Peter and Gordon, and it made its way across the U.S. When was your first visit as a part of the British invasion? Did you consider yourself that?
Yes. Well, we didn't really, I don't think the phrase had come up quite yet. Maybe it had. But yeah, we were very excited, obviously. We knew America was the place we wanted to end up. I had posters of New York on my wall, even at that stage, I was desperate to get to America, mostly as a jazz fan. I had copies of Downbeat with all the jazz clubs I wanted to go to in New York, circled, long before I got there. And I went to all of them, and so on. So yeah, we were dying to go. I think our first tour was the one where we did the World's Fair, whenever that was. 65. So, 64?
64, 65.
We have 64, 65.
Yes.
Not sure.
Do I hear 66?
Anyway, so there's that thing, if you're in New York and you're driving from the airport, there's that rusty old sphere thing called the Unisphere, which is still sitting there. And we were very excited about playing New York. We were playing at the Unisphere. We played underneath the sphere thing. And there was a moat around the stage, full of water. And the police continually underestimated the fervor of the girls. I mean, the Beatles would show up at every gig, and the police would go, "It's all under control, don't worry, we've got so many policemen, nothing can happen." And the minute the Beatles walked out, the police were just overwhelmed with this sea of crazed American chicks. So of course what happened? They said the same thing when we played this World's Fair place. We were in the Unisphere. As soon as we came out on stage, they all jumped in the lake, the moat, and swam across and climbed on the stage. So it was kind of like an early wet t-shirt contest. It was fabulous.
Early immigration.
They both lived out here. So yes, we were thrilled to be in America, and LA was going to LA was a separate thrill. I mean, for me, you got to remember, the previous winter, I'd still been at university. This is before I left. I left when we had a big #1 record in England. I was studying philosophy at King's College London. I'd be bicycling home at like 4 in the afternoon in the dark, in the winter, because it gets very dark very early, in the rain, on a bicycle going home from studying philosophy. And a year later, instead of that, I'm driving down Sunset Boulevard in a rented Mustang convertible, being recognized by beautiful women. And I kind of went, this is an improvement.
Being that you became a physical producer of records, and obviously we pointed out Linda and James Taylor, did you also produce Peter and Gordon's songs?
No, I didn't. We were produced first by Norman Newell, the man who signed us, and then later by John Burgess, who produced us and Manfred Mann and lots of other good people. So no, we were produced by EMI staff producers. But during the course of that process, learning from watching them and watching George Martin, of course, which I did get to do from time to time when I visited the Beatles later on when I was head of Apple and could do that. And so, so I learned a lot about production from those people, but none of them ever produced us. Watching George Martin and watching that stuff go down, of course, you learn a lot about how to deal with musicians and ideas when we're making records and stuff. And first time I went in the studio, I was determined that I wanted to be a producer. Once I realized that job existed, once I understood what it was, that you could actually have a plan and an idea in your head for what a record should sound like. The fact you could hire musicians infinitely better than yourself and tell them what to do. I thought that was brilliant. You know? I still do that.
I want to ask you this. You and I talked about this last week on the Rockin' and Romance cruise, and you gave us a little information. I wonder if you'd be willing to share what you're working on with our group here.
Well, I'm not supposed to, but the cat's out of the bag, because I told one person this, although I'm returning as soon as this is over. I'm back in the studio with Barbara Streisand, who I'm making.
That I was listening to, he was playing guitar on. But also the English, what was known as the folk baroque, which was Bert Jansch, John Renwell, Pentangle, that end of the spectrum. And also, I mean, even before the British invasion hit America, I mean, we were getting Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, I mean, the whole folk thing, which was just so fascinating to me, because the idea that you could play one guitar and have that, cover an entire, the bass and the melody and all of that, and it just, for me, all these elements just became part of kind of my ambition. Just a quick note, when I got to New York, when Wings folded in 1981, one of the first people I started working with was Tom Dawes.
Really?
Yeah, I did American Express, Lincoln Mercury, Coca-Cola, playing on jingle sessions.
Yeah, Don was a jingle maker.
Tommy and I we each started jingle companies when the group broke up. And I remember we weren't sure where we were going, and Tommy actually asked me to come. He had started a company, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come work for me?" And I thought, nah, I'll start my own, And knock on wood, we both had really nice careers. But that's awesome that you worked for Tommy. That's cool.
Yeah, the cool thing was that all of a sudden I started getting checks, like residual checks from Local 802.
Can I think I shared this check story the other day, but can I do it?
Sure, of course.
I do it. It is amazing if you can succeed in this jingle business, because I remember that the Cyrkle, I will tell you very frankly, my income, I think in 1966, which was maybe half the year where Red Rubber Ball was a hit, about $5,000. In 1967, I think it was $13,000. That was my income. Fast forward a little bit now to getting into doing jingles, and I didn't need a lot of money. I had a little studio apartment, and we were getting things going, and gradually there's a pile of checks that would just, they just come in, and exactly. And I didn't pay attention to it, and I thought, I really should deposit these. I didn't know how much it was. And I went to the bank, and and they added it all up. It was $20,000 just laying there. I mean, it was an amazing career to luckily get into.
That gives you an idea for maybe a banking commercial.
I can't remember every commercial that we did, but we did a bunch of banks. Yeah, we actually did.
I
wanted you to, you started to tell the story of getting into Wings, so maybe you can finish that and we'll talk.
Well, being a Moody Blues fan, when I was 1977, September of 77, I was playing lead guitar on a TV show with David Essex, who was a big pop star still at the time. And each week there'd be a different musical guest, and one week was Twiggy, which was really cool, because she was doing musicals apparently. And there's a video on YouTube of she and David Essex doing "Send in the Clown." You can hear my acoustic guitar on that. And then we had Ronnie Spector, and then we had Denny Lane.
Yes.
And Denny did Go Now, and I played a guitar solo on it, and he liked what I did. But I'd never seen the performance of it. And of course, when you're in the band on a TV show like that, you're not on camera. You're off camera. And there's a video that just popped up on YouTube of Denny doing it on that show. And when I launch into the guitar solo, he does one of his little sideways smiles. And it's like in that nanosecond, my life changed. Because that was kind of me basically passing the Denny audition.
Sure, yeah.
And then it wasn't until about 6 months later when I was working at Abbey Road and I got the call to go audition. I didn't know any Wings tunes, so I borrowed some LPs from my brother. But as it turned out, we played some Chuck Berry tunes and some reggae grooves. And
That makes sense with Paul.
then Paul said, "What are you doing for the next few years?" You know? I think I fit the suit, basically.
Really, come on. You can
But that
certainly.
versatility that I had aimed at was the thing that really helped, because I replaced Jimmy McCulloch, and Jimmy was a great rock and roll guitar player, but Paul was looking for somebody who could cover a lot more styles, which is what I really had specialized in.
Right, and then you, like we were talking with Don, you started writing, or it was much later, but television riffs for shows.
Well, I once Wings folded, and by the way, before we go on talking of Women's History Month, I mean, Wings was Paul and Linda. Linda was crucial to the
Sure,
band.
yeah, for sure.
And their relationship was really a great template for my relationship with my wife Hope, in terms of us working together. But I moved to New York and started getting into jingles there and some record stuff. But then when I met Hope, she was from LA, I moved to LA. Found myself at a very weird nexus of pop culture because she was a comedy writer. Her dad, Sherwood Schwartz, created Brady Bunch of Gilligan's Island. Wow. So British Invasion meets American sitcom. And then I started getting into studio work in LA, and I think one of the first sessions I did was the opening credits of Splash on Wooly Bully. I played guitar on that. Played on Home Improvement, all 8 seasons, 7th Heaven, 11 seasons, Roseanne, just a million TV shows. Actually, one of the first shows I worked on was Joni Loves Chachi, where Mitch Weissman from Beatlemania was playing Paul on the show.
Wow.
Yeah, but I also played on the last episode of Happy Days too, so it kind of goes back to the early 80s. And then I got into composing and all that, but all along my true passion was playing solo guitar.
And also you have a stack of Beatles music that's recorded instrumentally by you, and I think you have a new one out called
Yes. I've done 4 albums in the LJ Plays the Beatles series. And this was because Hope insisted that I do Beatles. I started off doing my own compositions.
Right.
But she said, I love the way you play Beatles songs. Can you do an album? And I said, well, I'll do it if you produce it. So she became the producer. LJ Plays the Beatles. LJ Plays the Beatles Volume 2. LJ Can't Stop Playing the Beatles.
LJ is going to get arrested if he plays one of them.
And the Fab Fourth. And then when we went over to see for Billy J. Kramer's 80th birthday party and to work on his album, I booked a day at Abbey Road in Studio 2 so that I could record a dozen of my favorite arrangements, which is A Day in My Life is the new one. And we have CDs here. The vinyl you can get through Amazon or from your friendly local record store.
Very good. That's awesome. Sure, Jim.
Yeah, I've got a couple of Beatles stories. But when we played with them in London, one day Paul came in. Paul was very friendly. He was the most friendly to us. He came into our dressing room and he had a guitar with him. And we went, oh, what's he, what does he want? And he said, oh, do you want to hear a song? Do you want to hear one of my ideas? So, of course. What can you say? And so he started playing the song, and it was Yesterday. And he didn't. He said, "Oh, I haven't got any lyrics, so I'm calling it Scrambled Eggs." And he sang this song about scrambled eggs. We thought maybe better change the lyrics, But we were sort of stunned. We were sort of hypnotised by this standing in the dressing room, him playing Yesterday. Wow.
But there was a time he was asking around that he thought he had heard it somewhere. That's where you should have jumped in. I wrote it last night.
Well, apparently he told us. He said, oh yeah, we nick ideas from all the other bands for our songs. And he said, we know the Stones do as well. But apparently he woke up from a dream with that melody going in his head.
Yeah. He was living at the Asher House, and tell you which room. Maybe some of us can benefit from the air that's in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, did he have any lyric that followed Scrambled Egg at the time?
Oh my baby.
Do you remember that? I mean, I just wondered, like what came after Scrambled Egg?
I can't remember what the lyrics were.
Well, the way he sings it now when he tells stories, scrambled eggs, oh my baby, how I love your legs. Just like a placeholder. I felt like Paul for a second. Pretty good. Can you move a chair up here? And LJ, since we're talking Beatles, I wanted to ask you about your relationship with George Harrison and how that's worked out.
Well, when I was doing session work, this was the mid-80s, 1986, I was asked to play on a session for George, because he was doing music for Shanghai Surprise. And at the time, Hope was 9 months pregnant. And the night before the session, she went into labor. And she was so excited about meeting George. And it's like, but instead of Here Comes the Son, it was Here Comes the Daughter. But Ilse was born at 7 o'clock the next morning. And the hospital wasn't that far from the studio, and Hope insisted that I go and work with George. So I went to the studio, got George on the phone with her, and he said, whenever you're ready, come and visit. So Ilse is 2 days old. We go to Village Recorders in West LA, and take her in, and George takes her out of the baby carrier. And he starts dancing around with her. And as he was handing her back, he touched her on the forehead and said something in Sanskrit. And we said, what did you say? And he said, well, I was so taken with this young life that I gave her the gift of music. Blessed by a Beatle. And it took, because she's a very successful songwriter. She wrote, amongst other things, Treat People with Kindness for Harry Styles, Panic at the Disco's High Hopes, Shawn Mendes' Mercy, All Night on Beyonce's Lemonade album. It's a long list if you look up on Wikipedia. And she has her own album out called From the Valley, and is going to be playing the Albert Hall on.
Wow.
So thank you, Jill. But just as a coda to this, we recently had a conversation with Olivia when we told her this story. And she said, it was kind of unusual for George to do that. So he really must have felt something. Yeah.
I want to know, can you play a couple of things on here just so?
I could.
Would you please?
But why don't you ask a few more questions and
And you'll jump in, okay?
I'll jump in.
Cyrkle, I heard a story that one of your towns that you went into, that when you were with the Beatles, that there was a group ahead of you that impersonated you with hats and wigs. And is that? I'm just trying to get to the. Is that true?
Oh yeah, it actually is true. In Washington D.C. at the Washington concert, a couple of high school guys had this idea. They rented a limo. They got a whole bunch of girlfriends to cheer them at a hotel, and they said, "We're the Cyrkle." And we were Red Rubber Ball, and turned out they were very well known, but our faces were not really that well known. And they even got cops to help the limo get to the stadium. They let them right in. Hey, we're the Cyrkle. The limo came right in. Nobody stopped them, and they spent the entire concert in the dugout with us. And they got away with it, and when we met them there, it was like we had a laugh, and hey guys, cool, we did that. But when we first got in, everybody was saying, oh, but you're here already.
And you were awful, by the way.
I mean, I just have to say, they did a really cool thing. And the fact that, you know, they did us, that was, I mean, how ballsy is that?
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yes, yes, sir.
We're waiting for LJ. Let's hear a little Roseanne.
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't just keyed up wrong, okay.
No, I can give you Huggy Proof.
Oh, that's what you want.
Turn me up on the...
Awesome. We have to have Laurence back, don't we think? And can you play just a little bit from the new CD? One of the tracks from the Day in My Life?
How long do I have? I don't want to take up any more.
We'll give you a minute and a half. So what are you doing these days besides the Flower Power Cruise?
Besides Billy J. Kramer's new album, another album I co-produced is with an artist named Juber, which just came out last Friday, who's kind of in the Dr. John Leon Russell kind of vibe. And you know, there's always my own stuff to be working on too. So, and I'm still doing studio work. I just played on a song for Carla Olsen from the Text Tones with Alan Clark from the Hollies that was #1 on the UK Heritage charts. And just a lot of stuff like that, you know, just kind of general music business things. Because I'm traveling less now, so I'm getting back into production. And then Hope and I have the Brady Bunch musical, which we're in development on, which we co-wrote. She wrote not only the songs with me, but also co-wrote the book with her brother. And our oldest daughter, Nico, had an off-Broadway musical running in last spring called Millennials Are Killing Musicals. So the whole family is kind of just busy. You know, and Hope just sold a Christmas movie to Hallmark. So
You know, you guys are making us look real lazy.
and then, but when I get home, I got to see my accountant and get the taxes.
No, the checks will be on the table. Don, the checks will be waiting for you.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, just in the reality of the world that we live in, you know, we talk about getting residuals from jingles, but one of the benefits, the great benefits of being a member of the Musicians Union is that there are revenue streams that come from that. You know, there's, for example, they just announced there's a new thing that if you play on a streaming show, now you can get residuals from that.
Part of the agreement.
And then there's also, you know, there's performing rights organizations, not just ASCAP and BMI for writers, but also Sound Exchange, PPL in the UK, that actually you get royalties for being a performer, not just for being a writer. It's all part of the whole kind of digital change.
Sure.
So, and a lot of that is just kind of the administrative side of it, making sure that you get paid what you should. You know?
Exactly. Jim, what are you up to with the band? What are you up to? What projects have you got going on? Well, with the band or personally, yeah.
Well, right now we're just looking into ways of carrying on.
That's always good.
Yeah, I mean, this is great, you know, doing the cruise, because we've done it 4 times, and that really does help, you know, meeting people and seeing nice people.
I told the listeners in the audience last night that you're the loudest band we've ever had on a full stage.
Yeah,
but that's a good thing.
Is that true?
I think it is. Yes,
I thought you had the fudge on one year. They were putting out. The fudge, vanilla fudge.
Oh, Vanilla Fudge? Possibly. And also the Family Stone. They're pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're in that top tier of top tier.
Not too loud.
Don, I know you guys came out with a new CD for Cyrkle, and you've got some historical pieces on there, so tell us what's up.
Well, we did this debut show, was it yesterday? I guess we did it. We talked about a lot of things that are on this new album. But before I tell you about the one song that is relevant to this venue here, it was really cool to do a new album, and I really didn't even want to. And the other guy said, "Yeah, let's do it. Come on, let's do it. It'll be fun." So to do studio stuff and do it again. But there's one song that is in there that we didn't talk about actually yesterday. It's called "We Were There," and essentially it's a reference to holy cow. We had 2 hit records, and we played with the Beatles, and we were around at a time when music was changing. We were there. It was just amazing, and the lyrics say that in that song. So that's one thing I'd like to just bring
Okay,
up.
your CDs are available here on the ship still? The CDs are here? Or forget it?
Pat, CDs are here. Yeah, you can,
Yeah.
you can get them.
And Peter, thank you for being here and tell us what you're up to.
Well, we've got some shows to do and stuff, but so it's a mixture of stuff. I've got to finish this album, which will take a few months. But they're trying to get that out this year, the Barbara album, and a lot of shows. So yeah, the calendar is full.
All right, well, please keep room for us. And go back.
Can I say one more thing? Also relevant to this little thing that we're doing. The Cyrkle introduced Red Rubber Ball on the show Hullabaloo. And I actually, it was back to the Coast Guard Reserve. They actually gave me a pass to go into the city and do it. And the thing that is relevant to this little thing that we're doing here is, so we get on this show, and the host was Paul Anka, also Leslie Gore, and Peter and Gordon. So, I mean, how cool is that? And here he is. I mean, it's just an amazing circle thing.
Full circle, as you like to
It's
say.
true. There were always good bands on Hullabaloo. That's the first place I met the Birds. A lot of Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. You know, and all the big stars doing Hullabaloo. It was fun.
Well, how about a hand for
Yeah, the best would be Juber.
Just so you'll know, they aren't going to sign over there. The artists are going to go in this way so they can get organized, and then you guys, if you form a line to my right,